What if I told you that the moment that shook the entire Sichuan recording studio was not planned, not expected, and definitely not part of the official schedule? What if I told you that one of the biggest stars in the country walked into that quiet room with a purpose so powerful it changed the air completely? What happens when two worlds that have been quietly circling each other finally collide in the most unpredictable way? This is the moment that fans are replaying in their minds over and over again. And if you are watching this right now, make sure you subscribe because you are about to dive into one of the most intense and emotional chapters in their story. The day started like any normal recording day. Shen Yue had arrived hours early, wrapped in the calm seriousness she always carried when she was working. The Sichuan studio was warm and softly lit with a hush that settled deep into the walls. Everything felt steady, peaceful, and predictable. She went through her lines, her breath steady, her voice smooth, her expression focused. No one in the room had even the slightest idea of the storm that was walking right toward them. Outside the building, the quiet street carried the soft rhythm of Sichuan life. The distant sound of vendors, the smell of fresh spices drifting through the air, the warm afternoon sun settling over the rooftops. And then a sleek car pulled up to the corner. A pair of black-tinted doors opened slowly. And out stepped Miles Wei. He stood there for a long moment as if trying to steady himself before going inside. He wore no disguise. No hat. No mask. Just himself. Calm yet visibly shaken. Focused yet carrying something heavy in his chest. His eyes moved toward the entrance as if he already knew what he was walking into. And then he took a deep breath and stepped forward. Inside the building, one of the staff members froze the moment they saw him. They blinked once, twice, unable to believe what they were seeing. Miles Wei was not expected. He had not called ahead. He had not sent any message. He had simply arrived. The staff stumbled over their words, but Miles only gave a soft nod and asked gently where Shen Yue was recording. He did not wait for an escort. He walked through the hall himself with slow, careful steps as if every part of him was tuned into something deeper. He paused outside the studio door. He could hear her voice. Soft. Steady. Focused. That familiar voice that once calmed him now made his heart twist in ways he did not want to admit. He placed his hand on the door for a moment. His chest rose and fell unevenly. Then he pushed it open. The room fell silent. Shen Yue turned around slowly, and when her eyes landed on him, the script she was holding slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floor. She did not move. She did not blink. She simply stared at him like he was both the last person she expected and the only person she wanted to see. Miles stepped inside, closing the door behind him quietly. Every staff member in the room froze, unsure whether they should leave or stay or simply disappear into the walls. The air grew tense, thick, heavy with a strange mixture of surprise and something else, something emotional, something that felt like it had been waiting for this exact moment. He looked at her with an expression she had not seen in a long time. Vulnerable. Tired. Soft. He took another step toward her, and for a second Shen Yue almost stepped back. Not out of fear, but out of the overwhelming wave of emotions rushing through her. He said her name in a voice that carried both warmth and aching. A quiet echo that filled every corner of the studio. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself, but her hands trembled slightly. Everyone watching felt the shift in the room. Something deep was unfolding, something raw, something that felt like truth finally stepping out of the shadows. Miles asked if they could talk. His tone was gentle but firm enough to silence every other sound in the room. The director gave a silent nod for everyone to step out, and soon it was just the two of them standing face to face in a room that suddenly felt too small for everything they had left unsaid. The moment the door closed behind them, Shen Yue asked him why he came. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried emotion so thick it nearly broke him. He took a long breath and said he came because he could not ignore it anymore. Not the quiet distance between them. Not the unspoken tension. Not the way he had watched her struggle alone without stepping in. He said he could not sit back any longer pretending he did not care. Her eyes softened, but she tried to push back the wave rising in her chest. She asked him what he was expecting to find here. What he wanted from her. Why now after so long? His answer left the entire room in silence even though no one else was there to hear it. He told her he came because he missed her. The words were simple but they carried years of emotion behind them. They hit her like a quiet storm. She looked away trying to gather herself but tears blurred her vision. She did not want to cry. Not now. Not in front of him. Not in a place where she needed to be strong. But emotions have a way of breaking through the strongest walls. He stepped closer and she did not move away this time. He lifted his hand, hesitated, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. She held her breath. The touch was soft, careful, full of unspoken meaning. She finally asked him what he wanted her to say. What he expected her to feel. What he thought would happen if he walked into her life again like this. His voice shook slightly when he replied. He said he did not know what he expected. He just knew he needed to see her. He needed to hear her voice without a screen between them. He needed to look into her eyes and tell her the truth he had been avoiding. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and longing, and then very quietly she told him that his presence still mattered to her far more than she wanted to admit. The tension between them deepened. Softened. Finally cracked open. For a long moment they stood there in silence, both breathing heavily, both staring at each other as if searching for something neither could put into words. Then he reached for her hands and she let him hold them. Their fingers intertwined naturally as if they had been waiting for this moment for far too long. He whispered that he did not come to cause trouble or confusion. He came because he finally understood that running from the truth only makes the heart heavier. He told her he would walk away if she asked him to. But he prayed silently that she would not. And she did not. Instead, she asked him if he was ready to face everything that would come with this. The attention. The questions. The rumors. The scrutiny. The very thing they had both tried to avoid for years. He squeezed her hands gently and said he was ready. Not because it would be easy, but because losing her again would be far harder. She let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. A soft, fragile breath that carried relief and possibility. Then she nodded. He pulled her into a hug. A long, warm embrace filled with everything they could not say out loud. She held on to him tightly, her heartbeat racing against his chest. Outside the studio door, everyone waited, wondering what was happening inside. They had no idea that within those walls two hearts were finally choosing the courage they had avoided for far too long. When the door opened again, both of them stepped out together. His hand rested at her back. Her eyes were softer, calmer, lighter. And the entire hallway froze. Rumors began instantly. Whispered voices echoed. Phones lifted. But nothing could overshadow the quiet, undeniable truth between them. Miles Wei had come for her. Not for publicity. Not for drama. Not for attention. But because sometimes the heart finally demands what the mind has been trying to silence. And Shen Yue, for the first time in a long while, let her heart answer. This was not just a surprise visit. This was the beginning of something neither of them were ready for. But something both of them desperately needed. The sun was already rising when their voices finally softened. Hours had passed, yet it felt like only minutes. The room was quiet except for their slow breaths and the gentle ache of everything they had confessed. But even then, one question hung heavily between them. What now? Shen Yue looked down at her hands as if the answer might appear there. She had poured her heart into the letter, but reality was different. Outside that apartment, the world was already spinning out of control. Headlines. Rumors. Speculations. And she feared facing all of it beside him might destroy the fragile peace they had just found. Miles stepped closer, gently lifting her chin so their eyes met. His expression was firm but warm. His voice steady despite everything. He told her that he did not want this moment to end as another secret. He did not want to go back to silence. He said he had spent too long pretending he did not feel anything, pretending distance was strength, pretending moving on was possible. He could not pretend anymore. She felt her heartbeat shift. Faster. Softer. Real. She whispered that she was afraid of ruining his career. Afraid of becoming a burden. Afraid of hurting him again. But he shook his head slowly. He said the only thing that ever hurt him was losing her in the first place. For a long moment they simply stood there holding each other in a quiet that felt sacred. No cameras. No noise. No chaos. Only two people finally telling the truth after years of hiding. Then came the knock on the door. Her manager. Breathless. Pale. Overwhelmed. She rushed inside waving her phone as if the screen was on fire. Overnight the leaked letter had taken over the entire internet. Not with hate. Not with mockery. But with support. Fans were defending her. Defending them. Calling their connection the most honest story the industry had seen in years. And even more shocking was the statement released by Miles' agency. A short message confirming one thing. He was not ashamed of the letter. He was not denying anything she wrote. And he would stand beside her no matter what came next. Shen Yue froze. Miles stared at her waiting for her reaction. Her eyes filled with quiet wonder because for the first time she realized something powerful. She was no longer alone in this story. Her manager left them with one final question. If they were ready to face the world together. The room felt still again, but this time it was different. The silence was not heavy. It was full. Full of possibility. Full of a future they never expected but could finally imagine. Miles reached for her hand first. And she did not hesitate this time. She gripped his hand tightly as if sealing a promise without needing to say a single word. That small gesture answered everything. They were ready. When they stepped outside the building, the first rays of morning light touched their faces. Reporters were already gathering. Cameras were lifting. Voices rising. But Shen Yue did not look away. She did not hide. She leaned a little closer to him and he moved his hand around hers with quiet certainty. In that moment the chaos faded. The noise blurred. The world became soft around them. The leaked letter that once felt like a disaster had become the turning point that changed everything. It pulled two hearts back together. It forced truth into the open. And it shaped a story that neither of them would ever forget. And as they walked forward together, fans across the world watched the beginning of something new. Something real. Something that felt like destiny finally catching up with them. The end, and the beginning.